I've definitely had to raise my game, I've realized. It's really important that you have this kind of energy, because playing to all these fans that don't really know my music as well, you got to keep their attention level. So you actually see instantly whether people are feeling it or whether they're not. So I've learned to gauge kind of my energy level on stage a lot more. When I'm having fun, I think that kind of transcends to the audience. I really notice in the sense that the crowd will clap along. I look out into the audience, I see people singing along and jumping up and down and laughing and having a good time. So I really pay attention to see if people are, you don't want somebody to be yawning. You want them to be kind of out of their seat and clapping their hands and smiling, and that's a good way to tell. I have to admit, when I lived in Los Angeles, it was kind of the dark period of my life. I mean, it was great in many ways because it really helped me to sort of find, that fire and whether I wanted to do this enough. But I guess I felt pretty misunderstood, and I felt like I didn't know where I fit in any kind of category here, because I feel like it was, in my experience, it was a little more kind of this kind of music and that kind of music and this kind of music. And so the fact that I never really fit into a category was always a struggle, but now it's a part of what I do that I actually am very proud of, and I don't really have any plans of changing it. Well, I grew up listening to only classical music and opera, and or heavily orchestrated music, and I didn't realize actually, but I used to listen to a lot of Beatles songs, or kind of 70s, 60s, 70s contemporary songs that had been kind of remade into kind of a classical sounding way, because my parents were just very into that, and they didn't expose me to any pop music. I didn't even really know what was going on in the real world. And I don't know, I think having such a heavy classical influence, it really made me identify the kind of pop melodic hooks, in pop songwriting. And so I think that it was just, to me, it just sort of made sense. And I had to go out and figure out what the kind of music that spoke to me was, and it's all different kinds, But I think that, I don't know, I just sort of identified with the classic way of writing songs, just the melodic structure and the chords, and it's also very influenced by church hymns, which I spent so much time in church as a kid that also had a big impact on it. I think it was really important for me to have a background in classical music and church hymns, because they really kind of formed my sense of melodic hooks and just the pull of the chords, the colors of the chords. I really identify with that music, and it's often hard because you're like, well, is this modern? Like, why do I write these kinds of songs? But I just do. I just, for some reason, love those kinds of chord structures, and there's so many similarities, I think, in great pop songs and in like a church hymn. Bridge Over Troubled Waters is, I guess, the classic example of the combo, the fusion of a church hymn and a pop song. And I find that really, really interesting. I wasn't worried. I mean, I think maybe my record label was a little bit more worried about it. I mean, my record is not religious in any way. It's not particularly rebellious. It's just, I always knew I was going to call my album Bible Belt, because it really sums up this album for me. It sums up the inspiration behind the songs, melodically, lyrically, and sort of, concept-wise. And the Bible was, for me, it was kind of a form of constraint in many ways, just the religion. And so I just felt like it was really fitting to call my album that. And I figured people are going to interpret it however they're going to interpret it, but I'm not going to tailor my kind of craft based on what I think people are going to think. You just have to do what you do and decide on titles that you decide on. Well, listening to the record, I hear little bits of her, all over it. I think what she really did for me is she kind of facilitated an environment where I felt free to just be myself. And she was really good at noticing the kind of artist that I was and realizing that she just was there to kind of bring that out of me even more so. And you know, she was loads of fun. I mean, I remember when we were recording Valentino, like when she would really feel something, she'd like start doing this little crazy leg dance where she'd like lift her leg and like, you know, swing in circles. And when she did that, I was like, okay, cool, this is good, it's good. And so that was kind of my measuring stick for, all right, is it soulful? Is she feeling it? All right, cool. It wasn't really my choice. I was in the car one day and I said to my mom, where are we going? And she said, we're going to a piano lesson. And I was like, okay, you know, and so I really took to it immediately, and but I hated practicing. I always hated practicing, and it was just one of those things where my parents were always like, you have to practice, and then finally one day my mom said to me, she's like, that's it, you're quitting, like you're gonna tell your teacher today. So I was like, I will. And so I went to my teacher, and my mom's like, you know, Diane has something she'd like to tell you. And I couldn't do it. I was just like, I just froze. And so from that point on, I just started applying myself a little more, and I really enjoyed it. And I just didn't like the constraints of classical training because I wanted to just play anything I wanted. So, but it was a great way to start, and I'm really glad I never quit. I'm glad I never told her that day that I was going to quit piano.